And I almost gave up, but then I remembered something Roger had said in one of our conversations, that because it's illegal to drink on the street, he often goes in that alley. Now, I never really knew what that alley was, but I decided to cross the road and to walk in that direction, and it's actually the richest part of Toronto. And I walked and I saw this kind of, I guess, alley and turned down it, and I didn't see Roger anywhere, and I almost gave up, but I kept going. And then in a little heap over there on Thursday, 3 days ago, I saw Roger. He was in the worst shape that I've ever seen him in. And I went and touched him, and I said, "Roger." And it took a while for him to wake up. And I said, "Roger, remember you were going to come and have dinner." And I don't know if he remembered, but he seemed to be agreeable. So then he needed to stand up, and he needed to do some business, and that was a bit awkward, and it was really unhygienic. I was going to call a taxi, but I thought, okay, I don't think a taxi's going to be cool with this. So I called my friend Dave, who's here this morning, and he drove to us, and by this time Roger had passed out again. And then I woke Roger up again, and he got up, and it was really hard, but he agreed. I was thankful. I was saying, "God, let him keep coming." And he got in the car, and we took him home, and he loved the home-cooked dinner. He was just loving it. And then we'd actually prepared a bed for him, because we have 12 beds in our apartment, bunk beds. But he had loved his meal. He was well fed, so we lay down on the living room floor and fell asleep. And the next morning when I woke up, he was gone. But yesterday, I saw him. Guess where? Outside the Toronto Reference Library. And his face lit up. And he told me how he slept like a baby that night. "And you have such a big apartment." I don't think it's that big, but he kept saying it. "And I love the food." And I said, "Do you remember what it was?" And he didn't. I said, "There was meat and rice and corn." "Oh yeah, I didn't eat the corn." And we chatted, and then I saw him again on my way back from the library, and he told me everything again. I think he forgot or whatever, but it was so exciting. And you know what I got out of it? What I get out of it is experiencing God in loving my neighbor. And I had lost that opportunity for year after year as I walked by Roger until Emily introduced me to him. Roger has so many stories to tell. Roger doesn't need another guy to give him a sandwich and then get mad when he doesn't eat it. Roger doesn't need someone to feel self-righteous when they say hello. Roger needs someone to spend time with him, to love him as a person, and then to remember that the God who came down and dwelled among us doesn't see much of a difference between me and Roger. We're both so far from his holiness. Good for me if I can figure out that he's an alcoholic. Good for me if I can figure out that he's going to spend my money on alcohol. Do you think God didn't do that with me? It's not fun sometimes to really try to discover what it means to love your neighbor, but it's amazing. And in the midst of that suffering, there's a powerful joy that can be found when Roger's face lights up. On this road, this man beaten and stripped. Another thing about it was the Good Samaritan was traveling. I don't know about you, but when I'm traveling, I've got intention, I know where I'm going, and there's a deadline. People are waiting for me on the other end. But this man, he stopped. Life wasn't too busy for him. It wasn't too inconvenient. Let's test ourselves when we're too busy. And finally, often we like to choose neighbors based on how much we like them or how much we can relate to them. But in this case again, in Luke chapter 10, this is the last person that a Samaritan would naturally even associate with, let alone help. Let's test ourselves, and instead of saying, I think I'm called to people just like to me, we might be, but let's test that and say, maybe God has wired me in a way that can really connect with someone from China, or someone from South America, or someone who grew up in poverty in Canada, or someone who has never had a Christian friend, someone who's wealthy. Let's test ourselves. One tragedy that I've heard from Christians too many times is the way they describe new Canadians. Oftentimes I've heard they're not Canadian enough. And it's so sad. I've heard too many times a Christian say, there's this Muslim family next door, and the wife wears the head covering, and the man has a big beard, and why can't they just be more Canadian? That's one perspective. Another perspective is this. And for hundreds of years, children have been birthed and have lived and grown old and have died for hundreds of years without hearing the good news from the lips of a child of God. And then through whatever series of events, a family from that part of the world that has never had any access to the Creator who loves them finds their way to Canada, and God moves them next to you. That is the perspective we need to have. Wow, hundreds of years, and I get to be the one to tell them about Jesus. How do we love our neighbor? Jesus said, go and do likewise. How did the Good Samaritan love this man who's lying at the side of the road? He had pity on him when he saw him. He had love, genuine, something genuine. I don't know about you, but this is the thing I struggle with the most. And this is where prayer can help the most. If you don't love people naturally, if there's a certain kind of person you don't love, let me tell you what to do. Pray, because all love comes from God. And when you pray, His love comes into you. And you'll be like the Good Samaritan, that when you see someone, you'll have love for them. Pause. Pause. Touch. There have been times when I wasn't too keen on touching Roger, but it's becoming more and more of a way for me to connect with him. And as dirty as he is, it's that human touch I've noticed that he so appreciates. The Good Samaritan got down and lifted this man up and put him on his own donkey. Let it cost you something. What did it cost the Good Samaritan? Oil, wine, 2 silver coins, and a promise that whatever else it costs, I'll pay. Share your own stuff, your own donkey, your own bed. Don't give homeless people your old suits. Love your neighbor as yourself, and let it keep costing you. Another tragedy that we naturally move to is to say, if I give Roger that loonie, then he's going to expect me to keep giving it to him, and I can't keep doing it. But actually, life is loving our neighbor day after day after day in a way that it costs us. This is life. Just over a year ago, a bunch of people, most of them from People's Church, moved into this neighborhood I told you about. And a few months later, one of our team members, who's actually a really awesome lady, we call Mama Hanan, she's from Sudan, she texted us, and she didn't give us a lot of notice. She said, there's a lady who needs help moving in to our neighborhood. And I think, I don't know, but my weakness probably thought, Mama Hanan, how could you tell us a day before? We've made plans. But those of us on the team who are more loving, I came at the end of it, decided to take Mama Hanan up on her offer to help this lady to move into our neighborhood. Now this lady was a single mother with 3 really beautiful children. The boy loves telling jokes. The girl loves to dance. And the little 3-year-old, I think that's how old he is, loves all of the above. He is full of life. And this family was living in a shelter. They'd been living there for a while, and we were the ones who had the joy of helping them move into our neighborhood. And over the coming months, I guess it was this love of God impacted this lady. And I'm going to give her the name Iman. Actually, I asked her if I could tell this story. And Iman means faith. After a few months, Iman began to discover Jesus. And we started to hear how she loved reading the Bible and how she loved to pray and pray all the time. And a few months ago, Iman became a child of God. And more recently, her children have been coming up to us in the parking lot and saying, "I love Jesus." This is a family from a Muslim background, from Israel. But here's the best part of the story. Iman is now loving her neighbor. There's a Sudanese family that we're spending time with that escaped the war in Darfur. And they both speak Arabic. And so Iman is one of the main people who's connecting with this family. And we're watching this family's eyes open up to the good news. It's so exciting. Before Jesus ascended to heaven, the only people who followed him could be found in one tiny part of the world. They were on a hill in Israel. And Jesus looked at them and loved them. And he issued the Great Commission. He said, "All authority has been given to me. Now go into the world and make disciples, baptizing them and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and I will be with you always." These were his final words. This was his vision. This was bringing the kingdom of God that he'd been talking about and opening it up to the whole world. But let's not forget something. The Great Commission is not the greatest commandment. The greatest commandment after loving God is this: love your neighbor. And so I think it would be an accurate conclusion to say this: should we not go into the world and to find someone who needs a neighbor and to be that neighbor? Love your neighbor. Who needs a neighbor? Will I be a neighbor to that person?